making such fuss. And I don't think I understand what's come of all of us. And I don't think I understand why we take this world for granted. I just want to get right back to Guitar Players Planet. I see it in the papers, you read it every day. The riots and the fires going on in South LA. The muggers and the government, they're all wanting the same thing. They take you for your money, whatever else spring. And I don't think I understand why we're making such a fuss. And I don't think I understand what's come of all of us. And I don't think I understand why we take this world for granted. I just want to get right back to Guitar Players Planet. Take me. And I don't think I understand what's come of all of us. And I don't think I understand why we take this world for granted. I just want to get right back to Guitar Players Planet. 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 Down by the water, maybe I'm the sun, maybe I'm a daughter when the music man calls. That's when I gotta play. For the things I never had, I'm burning with hate, with love. Spin around, round. 'Cause as a boy I had a dream. Carry it with me today. Yes, I do. When the world stops spinning around, I'll be rocking. Sunny skies, the smell of palm tree air. Looking back, I could never feel fair. The way the music has touched my soul, the way that the South holds its control. But I've got a new way to choose. I'm gonna start running back to the land of the new. Oh, na 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 na. Seems to me that I have lost my friend. Got the sunset off the highway again. Then I get lost on a long summer day. I must go back before it's too late. You're afraid, you're feeling alone. Time and space can never unfold. The holidays can ring in your fear. The ghostly embrace can only mean tears. And I've got a new way to choose. I'm gonna start running back to lands of blue. Oh, na 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 na. Sitting at the lake, I'm feeling confused, but I had my guitar, so I played this blues. But I'm afraid, what might be true, that I might never come back again. Seems to me that I've lost my friend. Got the sunset off the highway again. Then I get lost on a long summer day. I must be back before it's too late. Before it's too late. Someone to take me down at night. Someone to make my day. New revelation fills my soul. Oh, I can waste away. You distracting my attention, you're all that's on my mind. You not looking for perfection, but you're too hard to find. Now the first night is coming, and I know what to do. You know that nothing feels sweeter than someone I need to taste your life again. I need a rendezvous. New revelation just feel my soul. Beginning and ends with you.
Perfect timing.
God, it's funny. I'm used to the music.
Yeah, you didn't hear it. I had it done on purpose, but let me see. I just want to make sure I got this muted here. Yep, and we're online. Okay, we're good to go.
Yes, we are.
All right. I think I got everything fixed. Everything worked the way I wanted it to work, and you didn't have to hear the music, and we heard each other, and we had a good 10 minutes before the show to talk about what we're going to talk about. So, and Eric just must have ran down the steps and just slammed into everywhere. So I guess Eric made it. So, and I don't have Eric's audio. Let me see. I don't have Eric's audio here. Of course, there's something. Eric, I think it's. I don't know. I think it's on your side.
Try reloading, buddy.
Yeah, reconnect, Eric.
That better?
There you go. Perfect.
There you go.
All right.
There you
Hey,
go.
everybody. How are you? Happy Friday.
What's going on? Yeah. So, welcome everybody to the Friday night edition of AstroWorld Q&A. On the bottom right, you have Dr. Gaston from Innovations Foresight. He's going to be coming hanging out with us tonight. He's going to be giving us some really great presentations on a couple of products. And before we get into that, I do have some good news for everybody. Thank you, Dennis, for the input about the video and sound. I think we got it all. I think we got it fixed out. I think we got it fixed. So
Yep.
So we got another sponsor.
Yep.
We got another sponsor. So we're solid. We got final clarification from Optolong. Optolong is now an official sponsor of AstroWorld TV. And because they are a sponsor, they have given us almost $3,000 of filter giveaways. So including an SHO 3nm set, an L Enhance, an L Extreme, and an L Pro, a bunch of planetary filters, and an LRGB set. So all that's going to be going on. Look for that on the website and make sure that you register for those filter giveaways, because if you don't get on the wheel. You don't get on the wheel, you don't win. So make sure that you get involved with all of that stuff. So that is really, really, really cool. So before we get into all that, let's talk about our sponsors. And for our first, thank you to Woodland Hills and Cameron Telescopes and Night Skies Networks for sponsoring us. And for those of you that don't know or want to know more about the sponsorship for us, feel free to contact me at dan@astroworldweb.com, and I'll give you all the information. But Woodland Hills is a main sequence level sponsor who has given us a plethora of $50 gift certificates that we're giving away every month until the end of the year. Plus, we're going to be doing a big giveaway at the end of the year. So something nice for Christmas, maybe. We'll do it during the holidays. Secondly, we got at our at our Red Giant level. So now we have the new addition to the screen. We have Optalong. We also have Prima Luce Lab. And for those of you out there that don't know what they're giving away, they have given us, or they are making for us, an Eagle 4 Pro custom edition. It's going to be black. It's going to call the Eagle, and I'm going to Eagle Ellipse. I guess that means like eclipse. So it's black. So it's got a name now. So it's maxed out almost. It's got 32 gig of RAM, a brand new Samsung 980 Pro 2 terabyte solid state drive, Wi-Fi 6. It's totally go on the website. We got 57 people, I think at last count, logged in for that giveaway, and that's going to be a like July 8th giveaway. So that's coming up. And the promotions are going to come out. So there's going to be a lot more people involved. So make sure you get involved. Camera Concepts as well for a $50 gift certificate once a month. So thank you to them. And at our super giant level, Masters of Pixinsight and IP for AP have been super generous, giving us, and we're giving away tonight a class for Masters of Pixinsight. So it's a free class. You'll get the voucher for that. And they have a new one coming up soon. I think they're just getting ready to redo. They're doing photons to photos. Warren Keller is showing us how to do M13, how to do that in Pixinsight from beginning to end. So that's going to be really cool. And then IP for AP as well, who has given us a bunch of yearly subscriptions to give away. So that's once a month as well. So we're giving away something almost every show. So make sure you get involved. And thank you, of course, to our member sponsors, John Gambali, who is our only Black Hole member sponsor. So those are for anybody who donate on our Patreon for $20 or more per month. I'm still figuring out what I want to give you, John. You're getting the polo shirt. Maybe I'll throw in a hat or something. Tell me what you want, and I'll throw it in there. So thank you to John. All of our Red Giant members, super thanks to everybody. And they're getting their polo shirts. And for those of you that are the ones that don't have the little sign on it, the little Patreon sign, those are the ones that are still in the YouTube sponsorship. We thank you for that. Feel free to move over to Patreon because YouTube just takes a lot more out of your sponsorship and keeps it for themselves. So, and all of our main sequence members, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much. And your t-shirts came in. They're starting to go out this week. And I'm super excited about that. And our Protostar member, Kieran's Corner, thank you so much for your contribution as well. Also, we got some new guests coming in. We got Richard Wright coming up in just a couple days on May 4th from Starstone Software. Say that 3 times fast. That's a little rough. Eric Coles, who's an astrophotographer and also one of the hosts of the Astro Imaging channel, is going to be on May 13th. Then we got a friend of mine, Maxi, who is an astrophotographer from Chile, who's going to be showing us a lot of his work. And then May 25th is going to be a recorded show. We're going to have Chris Woodhouse, who is the author of the newest book that he came out with, Capturing the Universe. And you can get it out now. If you're on Facebook, you've seen it already. It's being promoted like mad. And that, if you wanted to catch us on any of our other social media platforms, our Discord channel is growing, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and thanks everybody for coming on. So that being said, we can turn this off, and we are back on the full screen. And just so everybody knows that I'm not lying, they finally came in. Not only this one, but the main sequence one. So the main sequence and the Red Giant shirts have come in. So for everybody that's watching now, that's waiting for them, that's been waiting for a while for them, they have finally arrived. They're going to be starting to ship next week. So look out in your mail soon for your AstroWorld's swag. All right. So that being said, we have about 25, 26 people showing up, hanging out in the chat. Everybody's saying hi to Dr. Gaston. We got Tarek. We got Al Need. Hi, Dr. Baudat. A lot of people are saying hello to you. So, Doctor, how's it going? Welcome to the show. Thank you for coming and joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me. So today I'm going to give you an overview of our technology and products. The way I'll do it is two parts. One is going mainly around this on-axis guider technology and the software going with that. And the other one is about the technology we just released for collimation using AI. And this is wavefront sensing kind of things. So I think it's good to split it in two parts, such you can have a better idea of both type of products. What can I else say? Well, yeah, I hope my English is not too bad because I have a slight French accent, I guess.
Yeah, actually, one of the questions in the chat are you French or Canadian?
Well, I'm Swiss.
There you go.
That's enough. But in Switzerland, we spoke, we speak 4 languages: French, German, Italian, and Romansh. German is the most common one, and French comes after that. I'm from Geneva, next to Geneva.
Okay.
Awesome.
So I came in US in 2000, and I kept my accent because, well, why not?
Well,
Why
it's tough
not?
to get rid of it, you know?
Yeah. I'm Swiss and US citizen.
Oh, yeah, you got dual? Yeah, sure. Awesome.
Yeah, I have a
Dual
foot on both sides of the Atlantic.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah, my mother's got dual in Ireland, I believe.
Yeah, nice place.
I've never been there. Never been there. But
You should go.
eventually I'll go hang out in Dublin, have some shepherd's pie. But
They have good beer too.
yeah. There you go. A lot of people yeah, so go ahead. Yeah, no questions in there. Everyone's just congratulating you and thank you for coming on. So take it away.
I think what I'll do is I share my screen.
Yeah, you can share it. I'll make it bigger.
Yeah, a slideshow presentation. And then the way I did it is a slideshow to explain a little bit some aspect of the product and the technology. And then I have a live demonstration on an optical bench to show you how does it work in real life. Good news with the optical bench is on my shop. So it doesn't matter the weather. We can use it anyway. I have one for the auto guiding, autofocus, or NAG kind of things. And I have another one for the wavefront. So I'll start with a slideshow and try to select the window. Give me 1 second because
No problem.
well, it doesn't give me access to anything except the whole screen. Why that? Oh,
You should have a pop-up that opens up underneath the,
yeah, he knows.
the logo.
He's just
I do, but the only option I have is full screen, entire screen, or my browser, but I don't see my PowerPoint. Well, let's see to share the entire screen and
yeah, just run the PowerPoint and just share the entire screen.
Yeah. So you see the screen?
Not yet.
I see a share.
Huh. Doc, are you using Google Chrome?
No, I'm using Firefox, but
that's okay.
We tried.
Worked the last time, yeah.
It should work. So
are you sharing? I know you got 2 monitors. Are you sharing the
I have only one
Wouldn't
monitor.
be AstroWorld if we didn't have a glitch.
I think it should work.
Yeah, we got it now. Yep.
You saw it?
Yep.
Okay. So now you see my screen, right?
Yep, I see the blue sky, and I'll make it bigger for you.
Okay, let me start the presentation.
You got it.
Is it good?
It is good. You got full screen. It's all yours.
Okay, let's move on. So the first things I'm going to talk about is our on-axis guider. So basically, it's a piece of hardware, an optical device, which is designed to do guiding using the same field of view than your target. So it's similar to the off-axis guider, except we are on-axis. So if you take the light from a star, the onag comes between your scope and the target. So the light from the target, the star or whatever, is made of visible wavelengths and near infrared, at least up to 1000 nanometer. That's probably the maximum wavelengths CMOS and CCD sensor, silicon sensor can see. The onag, you can see my my cursor.
Yep.
So the onag is basically a piece of hardware with a beam splitter in it. But it's a dichroid beam splitter. It splits the light by wavelengths, not by energy. So the visible wavelengths, typically below 750 nanometer, are sent by reflection to your imaging camera, and the infrared above 750 nanometer is sent through the guider. 750 means you don't lose anything for imaging, like H-alpha. So you will have a diffraction limited image for the imaging camera, which comes on the top of the onag, and you will have an astigmatic image, and you come back to that later, for the guider. And the guider you can use with onag, whatever the type of onag, is with chip up to 28 millimeter in diagonal, very, very large field of view at once without moving anything. 28 is above the diameter of most guider those days, but you can use, today's camera monochromed for guiding, like APS-C size. Wow. You don't have to, but you can. That's the whole idea, without having to move anything. So the IR light is split here by the beam splitter. The beam splitter, you can see it as a filter, basically. It's a tilt filter. So because the light goes through the beam splitter, there is some level of aberration for the guider, and we use it for autofocus. But there is no aberration whatsoever for the imager, because this is a pure reflection. It's like a star diagonal. A typical example, this is a setup you would see with the scope there, focuser or whatever you may have here, the onag, this is the XM version, the guider on axis, and the imager. There is even an XY table. You can actually move the guider to scan the field if you have a small chip. But now most of our applications and customers use a larger guider because they don't want to move anything, and because they are either remote or robotic. So the stage is usually locked to an online position, and the guider scans the whole field of view with a large chip. So the product is made of two types, the XM and the SC. So all the images are diffraction limited for the imaging camera. With this technology, you can guide on a target. So if you want to image a moving target against a star field, like a comet or anything, you can do that. The guider field of view is very huge, as I said, up to 28 millimeter in diagonal. There is no need of any rotation of any kind for guiding, which means you can keep your flat frames and you don't have to refocus because you rotate. You can still rotate if you want for framing your target, but you don't have to rotate to find a guide star. And you will see with the software we have, you don't even need a guide star. So what you can do with this technology on top of guiding, which is unique, you can do live autofocus. And I'll show you how does it work. The live autofocus idea is coming from the astigmatic effect of the beam splitter for the guider. So by monitoring the guider image, you can retrieve information for focus, which means you can focus while you are imaging, while the shutter is open on the imaging camera. You don't have to stop. You can stay on a critical focus zone all the time, which increases your throughput. And also an interesting aspect is when you go in higher, longer wavelengths, you have less seeing effect, which mitigate the seeing problem you may have with guiding in a visible bandwidth. So if you look at the way it works, I think that's a very simple ray tracing. You have the incoming beam from your scope in yellow, which converge to the focal plane of your telescope. And the green rays are the reflected rays toward the imager side where you have the sensor. This is the visible wavelength. The infrared wavelengths go through the beam splitter, the dichroid beam splitter, and they converge here at the guider sensor plane, and there is some level of astigmatism because this tilt window. And that's used for the autofocus. Here is a bit exaggerated, right? It's just for the sake of explanation. Here you can see the star by the imager, and here the star see by the guider. Just to give you an idea, the guider shows this kind of cross shape in focus, which is typical of astigmatism. How do we do autofocus with the ONAG beside guiding? As I said, we take the image from the guider, and we know the astigmatism is a function of the focus. And that's the same technology used in DVD optical pickup heads, DVD or CDs, to keep the laser focus on the disc. The idea is you look at the astigmatism, you don't look at the size of the defocused star anymore, like you will do with a V curve. You look at the shape of it. And with this shape, you have information about the focus, its magnitude, and its direction, which means now you can actually control the focuser live because you have information in which direction to change the focus. And this is an example of a guide star at best focus and 400 microns before intrafocal or 400 microns after extrafocal. You see the astigmatism is either horizontal or vertical in that case. And this tells us in which direction we have to move the focuser. You cannot do that with a V curve because you have no information about the direction. You have to stop, slew to a star and do the V curve. Here you don't have to do that. So we can keep a critical focus all the time without any interruption of the imaging operation. So the scope stays in target, even if your shutter is open. We correct the focuser by few microns at the time to be sure you stay in focus, critical focus. And we have a software named SkyGuard. I'm going to show does it work on the bench. SkyGuard can do guiding and focusing using the full frame of the guider. But by full frame, I don't mean the diagonal. I mean the whole frame. All the information coming from the frame. And with this information, we can compute the quality of the focus and the direction of correction, and of course also the auto-guiding. So here you can see the ONAG, the focuser is controlled by the PC through the guider, which also control the mount, and your imaging camera is here. So that's an example done by one of our beta testers some time ago now, to show how much you can gain by doing that. At the time, Frank in PA had an opportunity because he had two same equipment at the same location, two Hyperion 12.5-inch f8 scope and two Paramount ME on two peer side by side. So he decided to go with the same target with both of them, but compare how does it work with the traditional way and the ONAG way. So on the first imager, who was an STL 11000, he follows the standard procedure he always used before. And that means periodic refocusing every either filter change or every 30 minutes to deal with possible shift from temperature. So he did 24 frames of the target in LRGB for a total of 4 hours and 46 minutes. That's roughly 12 minutes per frame, including refocusing. And on the other setup, he had the different camera, but similar, but he had an ONAG and the live autofocus technique. So it took 28 frames for a total of 4 hours and 22 minutes for an average time by frame of 9 minutes, because he has no interruption whatsoever during the whole night. So doing the math means he saved 2.6 minutes per frame. For a total of 28 frames means an hour and 13 minutes of the night imaging instead of focusing and slowing, which is 27%. A quarter of the night was used for imaging. And here are the results of the target. I forgot which was the target, to be honest with you. So those are stack frames, LRGB. You can see the FWHM of the seeing. It wasn't very great, but it was not too bad for the place, PA. This is periodic refocusing. On the right is the ONAG and live focusing. You see it's quite similar, although it's a little bit better on the ONAG side, because we keep the focus all the time, perfectly critical. And you will see that on the demonstration bench. So how do we do this guiding and focusing using the whole frame of the imaging camera? And that's pretty much the end of the guide star, by the way. But the idea is to retrieve information from the frame. Basically, when you guide, you are looking at the registration, the motion of the image from a reference image or a reference position using the whole image. You can do that by doing digital image correlation techniques. So if you look at this, I take an image who has no star. It's a moon landing for, because I watched those when I was a kid. And I took this image and offset it to simulate a tracking error. Except there is no star to use, nothing. Well, by taking the first image here as my reference, my goal is to find the registration, the shift from this image on the right versus the reference on the left, without any guide star. And that's what you do with digital image correlation. You can extract the registration, and here you can see the 2D plot where there is a peak of correlation at the position here, which is the dx dy offset, registration offset of the image, moon landing. In 3D, you can see clearly the peak here. So by using the digital image correlation, we can locate the peak. All we need is something beside noise in the frame in order to detect any motion. Now, to do it in a challenging situation, you need to do a little bit more work, and that's part of my kind of things. So we do digital image correlation with multivariate statistical noise reduction. We don't make any assumption about what is on the image. We assume there is something. So we don't care about the shape of the guide star, if any, or whatever. We just make assumption about the noise statistical property. And from there, we can retrieve the position of the offset, the tracking error. In this example, I have just a star for the sake of the demonstration. And this star is pretty much buried on a sea of noise. So you can barely see the star here inside the yellow circle. If you use a very standard digital image correlation techniques, you get that. You get noise. There is no way you can find out where this star is. So, but if you use our technique, you get this. Now you find a peak here at the position 30 by 30, which is the offset between this frame and another frame I took. And that is used by your auto-guiding technique. So it works in very challenging extreme situation with very low SNR, up to 0 dB, pretty much noise level, like you can see here. You have a sea of noise, just few pixels of information where we can get them. And by the way, of course, we process everything in a field. Again, it doesn't need to be a star, but it's easier to show with star how does it work. So here I have an example with a non-ag guiding, and I would say a fair SNR, such we can actually guide with a centroid. You couldn't use centroid technique on the previous one. Here you can. There are 4 stars in purpose under a seeing limited condition. You see the star inside the yellow circle. The red one is the star used for centroid, a single centroid auto-guiding, like PhD-like kind of things, the classic way. And what you can see here on the right is a scatter plot. In green, this is the variation in deck and array during auto-guiding from processing the whole frame without knowledge about what is in the frame. We don't look at the star or have to find the star and compute the centroid. We just process the frame, like you saw before. In blue, this is a multi-star centroid. That's an algorithm used in some software like PhD today, where you have to locate the star, compute each centroid, and average the centroid errors across 4 centroid in that case. And in red is the single star auto-guiding. So you see with a single star, you have more spread error because you see more effect of the seeing. You average out a little bit the seeing effect and the noise by taking the 4 stars, and you see the blue and the green ones are pretty much the same in terms of spread, telling us using multi-star, centroid, or the full frame provides the same thing, except you don't have to look for the star. And you can work with SNR even lower than the level of a centroid technique can do. Now, let's talk about autofocus. So we have 2 software here. SkyGuide, who does only full frame guiding. With any hardware, you can use it for guiding with a guide scope, an off-axis guider, a non-ag, or a self-guided camera or filter wheel. He used, though, the full frame image correlation technique. And we have SkyGuard, which is the one I'm going to talk most today, who does the same thing, full frame guiding and live focusing if you have a non-ag. And both, basically SkyGuard is a subset of SkyGuard. It's the same software except it doesn't do any focusing because there is no non-ag. So both software have a comprehensive REST API you can use with example and tutorial for integration. They support ASCOM and MaximDL already, and we have integration of SkyGuard in SGP using our API. And we have the first beta integration with Nina. And that goes even further because Nina is an open source software. So the integration means part of the user interface you see here for SkyGuard is in fact integrated to the standard interface of Nina. You can still use this interface, but you don't have to. And we have also script for Windows, PowerShell or Batch. If you use ACP, CCD Commander, Autopilot, CCD Voyager, and those kind of things. So I think what I'll do is to show you on the bench now, how does it work? Let me give you a description of the bench so that you understand what you're going to see. I made this bench specifically to go to trade show and show the technology live, because I think the best way for most people to understand is to actually see it working. But we don't want to wait for the night or the good weather to see. So I made my own artificial sky. So this bench is made of 80 millimeter refractor in double pass. You will see that means there is a flat mirror here in front of the scope. The scope is a black tube here, and the light is reflected there. This way I have my artificial sky. There is an homemade adaptive optic unit. I made it long ago for myself and recycle here to emulate auto-guiding. So the blue box here, it's a AO unit, which means I can move the image to simulate a tracking error, and this way the system can do autofocus, auto-guiding with the blue box. I have an Optec TCF focuser here for autofocus simulation, that black box. So I can control both guiding and focusing. I can create some error and see if the system can correct. I have a non-ag on the back, which is my beam splitter, with, instead of the imaging camera here, I have a source made of an LED, a white LED, and a slide. And the slide is a slide of a sky, a collection of stars in that case. It could be anything. So it's an image I'm going to use for guiding and focusing. It's my artificial sky. I have a guider camera on the back of the ONAG, like you would have on a normal situation, who sees the infrared of the light. It's a black and white, a ZO ASI 1600 monochrome. And that's my red box here at the end. And to show something from the mechanical standpoint, I had the mechanical dial indicator here with a needle, and you will see the motion of the dial when the focus is changing. This way you see a little bit more what's going on. So I'm ready for the demonstration, but first, if there are any questions at that stage.
Well, it seems that a lot of people are excited about the Nina integration. So it looks like a bunch of people have been asking or looking for it, and thanking you for actually making it happen. Tarek actually asked, SkyGuide and SkyGuard, which one should I get?
Well, I guess it depends what you want to do and what you have. If you have already your own system for guiding, like an off-axis guider or guide scope or whatever, then you will use SkyGuide because it will do full frame guiding with anything. Now, if you want to do live focusing the way I talk about and I'm going to show now, you need to have an on-axis guider to create the astigmatism, and you can use SkyGuard, who does the guiding and the focusing now.
Got it. There's a couple of questions popping up now. Eric, you there? I don't know if I could hear you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Al was asking. Yeah, Al was asking one question. How does focus work with non-parafocal filters?
Good question. I can show that during the demonstration, but basically the way it works is SkyGuard can learn each filter for itself. So you usually pick one filter for the calibration of SkyGuard focus, and then you can ask SkyGuard to look at the same, let's say, star for the calibration through different filters and learn the difference. So after that, when you use SkyGuard, he needs to know through an API, Maxim, Nina, SGP, or even the ASCOM driver of the filter wheel, because we have access to that. He knows which filter is in use and use that information to track the focus for that filter. So the short answer, he manage filters like you would do with filter offset.
All right.
Okay. Nice.
We got a question from Bob, MX Quattro. Does the light going through or being reflected off the filter take away any image quality when using the ONAG?
No, the image you get on the imaging camera is a reflection on the dichroic mirror. You have to think about it as a flat mirror, an optical flat mirror, at 45 degrees like a star diagonal. Beside the inversion of the image and the fact you lose the infrared above 750 nanometer, which usually you don't use, there is no effect on the image. It's diffraction limited.
Nice.
And the transmission, the reflection of the visible wavelengths is at least 98%.
Wow. Okay. Next question from Jeff. Are there guide cameras that will not work with the on-axis guider?
Yeah, the short answer is I wouldn't go with camera, color camera, because usually they have an infrared filter in front of them. The window of the camera is usually coated to stop UV and IR. So if you use one of them, you have very low level of signal at the camera level. If you use monochrome camera, there is no restriction. The larger the chip, the better to use the whole field, but you don't have to. It works with a small camera too. So I will stay away of the color one for the reason I just mentioned, because most of the infrared will be gone, but that's it.
Okay. Jeff was also asking for what is that? Spectroscopy. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
Are there wavelengths that are lost when using the ONAG?
There is no loss of wavelengths up to 750 nanometer for the imaging port. You lose stuff above 750.
Okay.
As long as you stay in the visible.
You actually have a couple of users out there. We have at least 2 people that are actually using the ONAG in the chat. So that's nice to see.
That's good to know. Yeah,
and we have customer with spectroscope using the ONAG too.
Nice. Let's see.
Well, in that case, you know what? I think the best
yeah.
things to do is probably to start a demonstration.
Sure. Yeah.
So I stop my slideshow now, and you know, if there are more questions after, yeah, no problem, we can talk about it.
Absolutely.
So now I have a remote bench just next to me. Do you see my screen again?
Yep, we see the radar and the.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes, we do.
So what you see is SkyGuard. On the right side here is a live image of the bench you saw before, a vertical view from above. You have the dial, the camera for the guider, my artificial sky with the slide here and the source here, my ONAG, an adaptive optic, the focuser, and the scope with a flat mirror for the double pass. And you have even a clock. So what I'm going to do now is to show you how does it work with SkyGuard and that bench, because we are close as we can be to the sky. So here I have a picture of, we see 2 stars. In fact, there are more than 2 stars. They are dimmer stars, but we see those 2 mostly. And we can guess if I hide this, you can guess there is a star here too.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the live image. You see the frames coming every 1 or 2 seconds from the guider here. Now those stars may look a little bit distorted because remember we have some level of astigmatism, even in focus, at the guider, not at the imaging, right? At the guider. Be clear on that. Imaging is still diffraction limited. This astigmatism, as I said before, is used for autofocus. So the first things I'm going to do with this example is to play with auto-guiding. As we speak now, the system is doing auto-guiding. And what you see here, because we don't have a guide star, of course we have star here, but it could have been anything. I use star because it's easier to understand, but keep in mind, we don't process the stars. We process the frame. which is a different story. So what you see in this target is the current correlation level, which is a correlation between the incoming frames from the guider and the reference one taken at the beginning when you started to guide on a target. So it's pretty high, almost 100% correlation. You see the deck and array correction, if any. We are below the minimum move here, so nothing is happening. You see the SNR is pretty good, and you see also here information about the focus. So the rotating mark here in the center of the blue square box is my, if you want, my guide star. In fact, the computation, the offset, the registration from the reference and the incoming frame. So my goal is to keep the rotating mark inside the center, the blue eyes, no, the bullseye of the target. The target radius is my error. Here is in a pixel. We've been the pixel 4 here on that camera because they are quite small versus the optical performance of that scope on the bench. So my goal is to be inside here. And the blue box is actually the size of a 1 pixel. So we see we are sub-pixel accurate as we speak. And on the bottom of here, you have the actual focus. And the focus, the critical focus zone is a blue line. So as long as you are in a blue line, as long as this mark is in the blue line, you are in a CSF, sorry. And you could, of course, be out of focus on the right, intra or extrafocal. We'll see that. The first things I'm going to do now is I'm going to create some motion of the adaptive optic to create a registration error, simulate a tracking, in that case, a bump. So watch the stars. If I send a motion to deck and array, you will see the star moving, you see? And we see the registration marks moved, and it start auto-guiding. So, and I should zoom out such you see better. Because we were limited by a custom size here. We were outside of this custom zoom. We are back in. So if I go back to my custom zoom, we are back in here. Those dots, red dots, means we are outside the pixel size. And the blue one, we are inside. Those are basically scatter plot to tell you where your error was before. So we are back, right? And I'll do it again, maybe on the other direction, such you can see. So we're going to move far away and comes back. And you see the star coming back. All of that without knowing anything about what is on the frame. So I zoom in again. Now the next things I can do, I can dim the stars. I can play God, if I can say so. I have here a small digital to analog system. I build a current generator to control the LED current, therefore the energy sent by the LED on my slide. So I'm going to lower my, by a factor 10 roughly, my light. And you will see what's happened is the star are almost gone.
Yeah.
Well, the system starts to have some, noisy behavior still inside the pixel. Now you can deal with that by using less aggressivity if you want. But now if I move, you will see, and change the scale here so you will see what we're doing. It's moving out like he did before, and it's coming back. So it sees beside the SNR is very. I don't think you will guide with a centroid,
No,
a kind of thing on those stars, but he's back, and he's inside a pixel roughly.
wow.
So now let me bring the light on. again, get our star back, and talk about focusing. I'm going to leave the guiding working because I'm going to change the focus by alert. And by moving the focuser alert to make a point, it's going to shift a little bit the image because the mechanic is not perfectly aligned. And that's not a problem because in reality, when you focus, live, of course, you move by a few macrons at the time. So the registration of the image is not going to change. But here I'm going to move by 660 macrons at once. So it's a lot. But that's the goal, is to show you how does it work. So what I'm going to do is show you the here, the focusing plot. And also I need to access the control for, and that's the standard interface for the software. And he has the basic function, and you can set up aggressiveness, the classic way for auto guiding, except you have an extra tab for focusing. So you see the focusing plot here shows us 3 lines, 2 blue lines and a green one. The blue lines are the limit of the critical zone for the focus. Basically, it's the same than the blue line here. So we are inside the critical focus zone for this optic. And now here, I'm going to move the focuser by 300 steps. For a focuser like that is more than 660 macrons. So watch the needle here. I'm going first to move extrafocal, right? And I need to start focusing here. Now focusing is running and guiding. You're going to see variation on guiding based on what I said before. That's normal. So I move out the focuser 300 steps, and you will see the needle, right?
Yep.
And you see the stars are elongated now, the astigmatism effect of the ONAC for the guider. And the software reports an departure from the critical focus zone. We see also autofocus trying to bring everything back together. Yeah. And he's correcting the focus. You see the needle is coming back to where it was before. And we see the focus going back to the critical focus zone pretty fast. Yeah. Although it was a huge step. We are inside the critical focus zone one more time. So here we were extrafocal, and we got this positive bump in the astigmatism measured by the software. And now for the fun, I'm going to do the other way around to show you that the system knows the direction of correction. Now the needle is going to move on the left side by 300 steps again. Watch the needle, you see?
Yep. Wow.
Now we see we are on the other side of the autofocus gauge, outside the critical focus zone, is why we are red. The stars are elongated vertically now. We report a negative astigmatism, and we correct while guiding and imaging. Of course, those variations are very extreme. You're never going to see that in real life. You're going to see nothing except the system will stay in a critical focus zone when you are imaging. Doesn't matter if the temperature changes or anything. It's going to do that all the time. Just guess, fire and forget kind of approach.
Right. Yeah.
And if you have a filter wheel, so there is an advanced interface here, which you can use if you want to set advanced parameters. In that advanced interface, you have information about, basically the system is made of 3 different independent loops. One is the acquisition loop, who takes the image. One is the autofocus loop, and one is the auto guiding loop, and one is the autofocus loop. And you can run each of them for themselves. You can stop focusing, you can stop guiding. Of course, if you stop acquisition, you don't get any image, so there is nothing to do. So you can see different things in this interface. One thing I can show you here on the focuser advanced, just to have an eye, and you have access to that, to the basic interface as well. Sorry, not here. Settings. are the filter wheels. Here are the filters. I don't have any filter here, but if you have filter, the system here will have the actual astigmatism value at best focus for the different filters. So it will know which one to use when you move from one filter to the next. On those viewports here, you can see different things. This is the guiding correlation. You know the function you saw for the Apollo moon landing with the peak, where the peak is in red here, and he must be at the sun. It's like a guide star, basically. He must stay in a cross. And this is my live autofocus, so auto-guiding correlation. This is my reference frame processed. You see, there are more things in the frame than we saw. The system found the two big stars, the dimmer one and other stars you don't even see. That's a reference. And every time you get a new image, that's a new image. So this one is changing all the time. That one is my reference. And those are used to compute the correlation here. And from the correlation, the offset of the correlation peak tells us what to do in terms of auto-guiding. You have the same thing here for autofocus. I show you the autofocus with the guide star to explain how does it work. But the reality is, since we don't want to look at a star to speak of, we process the whole frame to extract the astigmatism using the auto-correlation function of the frame itself. So I don't want to go to the technical detail, but this technique doesn't care about what is on the frame. It's able to extract the aberration on the guider, the astigmatism, to retrieve autofocus, even if it's not a star, or if there are more than one star. And we use this auto-variant, auto-correlation function to compute the astigmatism and send correction to the focuser. There are many things I could say. We have plenty of plots here to show different things, including the computing power, performance, a log of the events of what's going on, focusing information as we go. You see, if I take the auto-guiding, for instance, you see we have this orange band. The orange band here, it's computed by the system as a statistical range. So it's looking at your current tracking error, and he builds a statistic as you go. And if you have a bump in your mount, a wind burst or anything, and you leave this range, you have the option to tell the system, don't correct, or wait X frame before actually correcting, defer your correction. Because I believe a bump going outside the range here, it's an accident. I don't want to correct on this one. So you have these kind of capabilities.
We do have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it was, Al was wondering how much back focus is consumed by the ONAG?
Good question. There are two versions today. The SC version designed for a camera, imaging camera, APS-C size, up to 28 millimeter in diagonal for the imaging, takes a 66 millimeter of back focus. The XM, who goes up to 50 millimeter in diagonal, full frame and above, it's bigger, takes 68 millimeter of back focus.
Okay.
Which is roughly 2 inch and something. I came from Switzerland. I kept my millimeter in mind.
Yeah, we're all still converting.
Information. You get all this information on the website.
Yep.
Okay.
Other question on the technology and software?
Let's see. So Tarek said, so the ONAG could be the best choice for my RC in the future. Let's see.
Yeah.
I can only agree.
Actually, Derek Thomas is online. He said, thank you so much for helping me achieve a very sweet setup.
You're welcome.
I think that was the only other questions
Yeah.
so far.
Yeah, there were just the other ones were more
statements.
And I'm not sure if this was answered. I believe there is a Lambda version. Can you explain a little bit more on that version of the ONAG?
Yeah. The Lambda version is available for the XM, the large one, the one for large camera. And the Lambda version is exactly the same hardware. All the specifications are the same. The only difference is the beam splitter. The beam splitter of the Lambda version has a different cutoff wavelengths at 700 nanometer instead of 750. And he has also a different transition slope. It has been designed to fit the filter used for photometry and the people doing photometry or exoplanet.
Okay.
One of the applications we had, and that's an interesting one, it's used for looking at exoplanet by differential photometric measurement. The only way amateur can do it, actually. And you can record with two cameras in the same time, if you wish, the infrared and the visible wavelengths of the transition. And that's used to detect if the transition is coming actually from an actual exoplanet crossing a star, or if it's a tight double star. Because if it's a tight double star, then you're going to have a situation most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, the double star doesn't have the same spectral characteristic and spectral type, and you don't see the same effect on visible and infrared. So we can find out the difference using this technique, among things. So we designed a Lambda to fit those filters used in photometry or in exoplanet work.
Gotcha.
That'd be interesting to see. I'd like to, because a lot of people out there use obviously PhD guiding. A lot of people use it, and from what I'm reading in the chat, a lot of people are using your software as well. I'd like to see. I'm sure there's been something like that. I'd like to see the like head to head between the both of them and kind of put them up against each other and see what that comes out with. The Sky Guide.
Or if you want to try, you let me know. I can provide you a trial version. We have some results on that, but the best way to do it is to do it yourself.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. So, and I have really garbage skies, so it'd be a good test. So.
Yeah, I'm afraid you will not be able to dim the star like I did, though.
No, I could. I just got to put the lens cap on.
That's right. Yeah, but that's a little. I don't claim we still guide if you put that one back.
I'll put a little white out on the inside. It'll be all
right. Just to clarify, Mike was wondering about is the QHY 462 a good fit for the ONAG? And I mentioned to him that you recommended it's best to use a monochrome guide camera with the ONAG. Is there a particular reason? Is it more just because of the bare matrix? I'm assuming.
No, it's because we use the infrared, and most of the one-shot color camera have a IR filter.
Yep.
Besides the filter on the pixels. No, I have customers who try and succeed using a color camera. They lose a lot of signal, but the software is able to track pretty dim situations, dim images. So, and the other things I haven't talked about, because, and I will be very happy to do that if you are interested one day. I gave a presentation years ago in optimal guiding. And optimal guiding is about what should be the guiding parameters for a given telescope, a given mount, and a given seeing. And among the key parameters is the exposure time. In short, if you go very fast, like I do here for the sake of the demonstration, with your guider frames, and you correct with those frames too strong, you're going to chase the seeing, because the seeing is basically the main effect of the seeing, not the only one, but the main effect is the star jumping around.
Yep.
Which is known as the tilt tip of the wavefront. If you do that, you're going to decrease your performance in auto-guiding instead of improving it. So you need to wait long enough to integrate the seeing. But of course, if you wait too long, your mount is going to be the problem. So in this context of the best trade-off, known as the optimal solution, there are mathematical ways to tell what should be the best exposure and aggressiveness for a given seeing and a given mount. And then I will be pleased to do this presentation again, if there is a day where people be interested by that. But for most people today, I wouldn't go too fast. You can go every second or two, but if your mount can track well enough in 5-10 seconds, I go for that, because you minimize the seeing, which is a useless. The things you need to understand in a nutshell is the jumping around of the star. Let's say you use a guide star with PhD to pick an example. It's not the same for one star to the next to it, because the seeing is not correlated across the field of view. The seeing, the motion of the star is only valid in a very narrow field of view, typically below an arc minute. If you look at another star next to it, it's going to jump around as well, but not the same way. So there is no relationship. So if you try to correct with that star using very fast images like adaptive optics, for instance, you're going to make the guide star better, but you're going to blur the whole image. So longer exposure is better. So all of that to say, if you use long exposure, and we have common user with 5-10 seconds, then even if you use a color camera, you will have probably enough signal. Now, my recommendation is still to use a monochrome if you can, but if you don't have one, I will try with a color one and see, how does it go. Now, in terms of camera, the one I use the most are the ZWO, and I have no string attached with that company. But I have to say, they make good camera with low read noise at affordable price, like the 1600, which is now uncool, like this one. It's below 1,000. I think it's 900 something now in a monochrome version. You don't have to go that far. It's a 24 millimeter diagonal, which is nice with a non-ag. So I use them, and we have a lot of customers using those.
Is that more? Is that what's more recommended? Is to use that particular size sensor to stay within a particular parameter?
No, actually, the size of the diameter of the chip doesn't matter. We can work with any diameter up to 28 millimeter.
Up to 28
for any ONAG. Yeah, for any ONAG. But after that, you have a stage. You can go even further if you move the stage, but you have to move the stage. In that case, you can go to full frame size. But without moving anything, 28 millimeter, which is APS-C size, right?
Yeah.
Like a DSLR size. It's pretty big. Now, having a large diagonal is useful because if you look at guide star, to go back to a sample explanation, because most people have experience with guide stars, for a given suitable guide star, the probability to find one goes up with the square of a diagonal, because the field of view goes up with the square of the diagonal, and the probability goes up with that. So you even if you don't have a huge quantum efficiency of the camera chip, if you have a large diagonal, it gives you an edge, because you have more probability to find a suitable guide star anyway.
Well, we got a question regarding your wavefront analysis software.
That's the next step.
Yeah, they were asking if it's a part of SkyGuard or is it a standalone?
Well, I'll talk about it next, but I can answer this question first. Both. So both. We have a standalone version which uses any image from any software as long as they are fit monochrome image. And so it doesn't take any image, it's just process it. His name is Skywave. And the Skywave is also integrated now in SkyGuard and SkyGuide. And you can see here I have the Pro version, but the standard version is usually the one you will get. If I click here, you don't see much of anything, but this is the collimation tool. So we have both. Okay. You can buy it standalone. You can buy it standalone, or if you buy SkyGuide and SkyGuard, you get it with it.
Nice. Okay.
Is there?
I think it's a good opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I was just wondering: is there a minimum size of say or speed of telescope with this that the ONAG would work for? You know, reason I ask that is with an OAG, it's usually best that those are used with the slightly longer focal length telescopes. Is there any restriction on that as far as the size of a particular the size of a telescope or speed, focal ratio to use with the ONAG?
In terms of aperture and focal length, there is no. I think the longer the focal length, the more likely you may enjoy the ONAG for the guiding part. For any focal length is useful for the focusing part, of course. Mm-hmm. Now, for a matter of vignetting, we don't recommend going faster than f6.
Okay.
To give you an idea, but it's not black and white. I mean, you start to have more and more vignetting above, below f6.
Okay.
But if you have f5.8, it's not the end of the day. Just to give you some idea.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay,
well, I think what I can do is to show you, you're welcome, is to show you the Skywave now, the technology of Skywave.
Sure.
So I have to go back to my presentation for that. And you see the presentation again?
Yep.
Okay. So Skywave is a tool designed for, and Skywave is a standalone tool, but also part of SkyGuard, as I said before, SkyGuide. So it's a way to do telescope collimation by the numbers. So Skywave uses a patented AI-based wavefront sensing technology to provide you a way to do quantitative optical telescope analysis and collimation. And I'll talk more about those later. Skywaves come in two flavors, one for collimation and one for collimation and optical analysis, metrology, in the Pro version. The Skywave collimator for collimation only is already integrated in SkyGuide. The engine under the hood is the same for both versions. What is different is the type of information you get on the software itself if you use a Pro version. But before I talk and show you live a demonstration of the technology, I need to give you a little bit more insight. How does it work? So when you do collimation, you get some kind of aberrations typically. And collimation is a matter of, and we're going to stick on that for now. It's a matter of aligning the optical surface, which are supposed to be perfect or good enough for the job, but they are not perfectly aligned, right? aka collimated. So the symptoms are if your surface, like mirrors, usually is what we do is reflector, have some level of tip or tilt tip or offset between the optical axis of the mirror, you get astigmatism and coma, basically elongated stars under seeing limited condition. If the spacing between the mirrors is not correct, you get typically fatter stars, basically symmetrical aberration, spherical aberration, but looks like defocus, basically. The stars are too big. And you could think you have a seeing problem, while in fact you have a spherical aberration issue. And here I show a few examples of those situations in a perfect world in space, which you will never see unless you use skywave technology. Those will be the PSF. I'll come back to that later. Your image of the star, basically. If everything is perfectly aligned, you get no aberration, and you get the Airy disk, the point spread function of a star with no seeing. Here, that's a sign of astigmatism and comma. Those are asymmetric aberrations, and they are coming from tilt tip and offset. This is spherical aberration, so it's symmetrical across all, the radius 360 degrees. It's axisymmetric. It looks like this one, except everything is the energy has been spread. And the next one you could see, it's trefoil, and trefoil is usually coming from pinch optics, like a mirror or a lens which is pinched by some stress from the mechanic, and you get distorted stars. So usually there are different ways to do collimation alignment. You can use a star test, and that will be a qualitative evaluation. So the qualitative evaluation of the telescope depends on the observer, his or her skills, and the seeing condition. You don't have actual optical data. So your goal is to try to get a nice image, usually of the defocus star. That's an example of your PSF with quite some aberration. The Strel ratio is not very good, 20% or so. That was my RC back then, before it was collimated. So that I would have seen in the sky, in the space, sorry. And that's my defocus star. And that's typically what most of us use, besides maybe laser or something to get the first mechanical alignment close. When you go in the sky and you look at it, and you can see it's distorted, it's not symmetrical and everything. And we all learn and read books and things like that. What to do with that is to try to make everything nice, right? But you still don't have data to tell you if you reach the goal. You just hope for the best. And it's a good way to do coarse collimation, but I don't think it's enough to do optical collimation. And you will see why here. That's an example of the limitation of using qualitative collimation, using the star test or even laser for that matter, because there are some artifacts and assumptions here who can be on your way. First, if you use techniques to align with the mechanical feature of the telescope, like the baffle, the edge of the mirror, the central donuts, the mark on the secondary mirror, and all those stuff, it's a good thing, but mechanic is seldom aligned with optics. I mean, the accuracy of the mechanic you need to meet optic, it's not even close. I mean, we are talking about order of magnitudes. I mean, in optics, anything, I think John Hayes used to say that optics, everything is made of rubber. You move anything by microns and you change your optical alignment.
Yep.
Way before you can see anything on the mechanical world. And there is no need to make a mechanic to the level of accuracy you would need for the optic. It will be first too expensive. And you just have to have basically collimation screw to align it, as long as you have an optical feedback to tell you when the optic is aligned. Now, if you have complex optics like RC, it could be hard to collimate without any data to tell you what's going on and the type of aberration you are facing. And another problem you see pretty much all the time, and it was a big I would say, wake-up call for me. During the beta test of Skywave, we saw pretty much every tester having the same issue. The central obstruction of the telescope is not center. Not by much. We're talking about millimeters, and millimeter in a diameter of 10 inches is something you'll never be able to spot. It's very tiny. And actually, it doesn't matter. And you will see it doesn't matter for the telescope. It does matter for the collimation. So if you have inevitable central obstruction offsets, coming from the mount of the mirror or the mirror itself, which is slightly offset, then you get problems because you're going to be misled when you look at the defocus image. This is an example with ray tracing. Here I have an SCT, a Schmidt-Cassegrain, and the Schmidt-Cassegrain, most of them, secondary mirror is spherical. And you see the incoming beam here of light, and this mirror is slightly offset. But the scope here is collimated. It's collimated because the optical axis of the mirror is superimposed with the optical axis of the primary mirror and the telescope axis. Technically, we name that congruence when both axes are superimposed. It's possible by just tilting the mirror because the spherical mirror is such that any line going perpendicular to the mirror, going through the center of curvature of the mirror, any radius, is an optical axis. So the fact you tilt the mirror to compensate some offset, mechanical offset, doesn't mean the scope is not collimated. In that case, it is, because his optical axis is aligned with the primary mirror, M1, and in focus, you have a diffraction limited star. And the telescope maker doesn't care about the fact out of focus you may have an offset on the shadow or even on the diffraction ring. They don't make the scope to image out of focus. They make the scope to image in focus. However, you use, most of us, the defocus image to infer the collimation. And if you use this one, and you're going to say is not in focus, collimated, sorry, and you're going to correct for that, and you're going to make the scope worse. And I have an example from data here from a customer who actually a beta tester of Skywave. And that's a typical example. That's a C14. But I've seen that with CDK and other telescope up to 20 inch. Again, because telescope maker doesn't care about that aspect. As long as you don't have vigneting problems, few millimeter doesn't bother them in focus. That's an example of central obstruction offset, mechanical offset. And that's 14 inch under, I would say, a good thing at 650 nanometer here. So it has been collimated with Skywave. And the central obstruction, you can see here. So let me, it's only a few millimeter, right? 1.5% of the scope aperture, which means there is no way you can actually see it unless you have a caliper or anything. So on the right, this is what the beta tester did, doing a collimation by the classic way. And you see a nice concentric rings with a central obstruction at the middle. However, the wavefront, and we're going back to that later, is pretty bad. No, it doesn't tell you much for now, but I'll go back to that. But the PSF is not good. You can see that. It's coma. And the strail is 60%. And that's because the offset of the central obstruction. By moving the collimation screw to make that image nice, well, he actually added some level of coma. And that's the scope collimated using Skywave, not using the shape, the qualitative approach, but using the data from the wavefront, the aberration levels. And this is the wavefront, which is much nicer. There is still some level of trayfall, but negligible. Those are not at same scale. And you see the diffraction limited PSF at 90% of strail ratio. And the quantitative collimation was 58% or 59, forget, 59, I guess. And the quantitative with Skywave give us 90% of strail ratio, above the diffraction limit of 80. And that's a very, very common occurrence. But you're not going to see, well, you can zoom in on the focus image and maybe guess some level of coma. But now you're stuck because you say, okay, what I'm going to do? So you're going to correct on the in focus, go back out focus. You know, when you don't have data, it's tough to know if you actually reach the performance when you are under seeing limited condition. because you don't see the airy disk. Now you could use MetaGuide to help you a bit on that, but still, it's just judgment. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about optics, such you understand how the wavefront technology works, which is not new. It has been used by professionals all the time, for a long time, and still in use in telescope and in optical labs. What we did is we replaced all the hardware by a sample processing. So geometric optic, everybody knows about it. If you take light from a star far, far away, you have a bunch of parallel rays. And the goal of your telescope, like here, like a perfect lens, is to band those beams, those rays, to a single point on the focal plane. So a point source, an image far away of a point, give you parallel rays, give you a point on the focal plane, right? Also, a ray in geometric optic is an abstraction. Ray doesn't exist, in fact, but it's a nice tool. It's very useful to do a lot of things in optic, but it's limited because it cannot account for diffraction. Here you have a point. And actually, if it was true, all the light coming the star, even very low power of light, will converge on one point, and the density of light will be infinite, and you will make a hole in the focal plane. You will burn your chip. Of course, it's not a mathematical point, it's a diffraction pattern because diffraction. So to understand diffraction, you have to remember light is made of waves. That's a true nature, quote unquote, because now we still have quantum physics, but let's stick with classic electromagnetic wave theory. So in wave optics, we treat light as an explicit wave. The rays are just parallel to the wave, the wavefront. And if you think about a star like this one, you have actually a spherical wave, like in a pound when you drop into the stone, you get spherical wave. But if you are far enough, they look like plane waves. And those plane waves converge to a point. The goal of your optic is to make a plane wave as a spherical wave, converging in one point where the image takes place. And by using wave optic, Fourier optics in that case, we can explain also diffraction. Because diffraction happens every time you have a wave limited by some kind of aperture or some kind of edge effect, like the diameter of the scope. A wavefront, because we're going to talk about the wavefront. Wavefront is an imaginary surface representing corresponding point of a wave that vibrate in unison, in phase. It's easy to understand in a pound, or here in a 2D projection of a source. You see the waves coming from electromagnetic wave, magnetic and electric field, moving away at the speed of light. The distance between two of those waves, let's say two peaks or two troughs or whatever, is a wavelength. And a wavefront is a place where the wave has the same phase. And for instance, the peak of the wave here. Okay, that's the way we're going to approach the problem from now on, is from a wave propagation point of view. That's the way we approach optics and aberration under diffraction limited condition. So the PSF, I'm going fast on that because most people know what it is. The point spread function, in short, describe all your imaging system capability for any point source. Therefore, for any image, because any image can be seen as a collection of points. So if you look at, again, a point far away, a star, a plane wave, diffracted by the aperture of the telescope, you get some kind of diffraction pattern, like you see with sea waves in a port, in an harbor. That's your telescope. We actually image that in a PSF, in 3D here. You see the amplitude of the light on your sensor, X and Y. And you get the typical image of the intensity profile of the diffraction limited image. So for a telescope, because we image at infinity, then the star PSF is the result of a plane wave diffracted by the scope aperture. So if you look at an aberration, any aberration in the optic imaging system, let's understand how does it translate in wavefront. Here I put back the rays such it's clear to understand. I have my parallel rays coming from very far away, my optics, my telescope. They converge to a point on the focal plane, and I get my PSF. My system is perfect here. Now, as I said before, this is a plane wave, and that is a spherical wave converging to this point here. So I just draw a cross-section of the spherical wave here, just to give you a, it's not at scale, but I did my best. And what you see here, this yellow circle tells us then the actual wave, spherical wave coming from this optic is exactly the same than the theoretical one. So there is no error. It's yellow everywhere. There is no phase error. There is no error on the wavefront. Now, over here, I do the same, except this optic has some level of aberration coming from any reason. Well, you see my converging beam and the rays, as well as the wavefront, doesn't converge to a point anymore. And my wavefront is not a spherical waveform. It has a little bit strange shape. And the result is now a PSF with comma in this example. And if you look at this section of the wavefront, this is my perfect wavefront in green here, my expected spherical wavefront. And this is my distorted one coming from the aberration of this optic. So at some location, the wavefront from my aberrated optic is leading the actual wavefront, yeah, and some part is lagging. And now there are some level of error plotted in color here. At some location, I'm leading in red, and some location I'm lagging in blue. The level of lag and lead is in color. You see in 3D here the wavefront error. It should be flat, but it's not, because my wavefront is not perfectly spherical. So the difference between the perfectly spherical and my actual wavefront is not zero, and I have some error. And if you remember, those errors give you those type of aberration. No error, yellow, PSF diffraction limited, perfect. If you have a peak and a trough on the wavefront like we had here, some part of the wavefront is leading, some part is lagging, well, I get comma. If I have a sidal kind of shape, I get astigmatism. If I have some part leading in the center and lagging on the edge, I get spherical aberration, and so on and so forth. So by looking at the wavefront, for that you need a way to measure the wavefront. We can look at all the aberration of an optical system. And just to keep in mind, a diffraction limited system where the straight ratio is 80% has a wavefront RMS error in wave of 0.075-ish, and we'll come back to that later. So a classic way to express the deformation of the wavefront error, like we saw here, is by looking at elementary wavefront error by type of aberration. We have the defocus wavefront. Defocus is a kind of aberration, but it's easy to fix by moving the focuser. We have astigmatism, sidal shape, we have comma, and we have spherical. When we sum all of that with the right amount, we get the aberration of that telescope. And that uses Zernike polynomials, mathematical tool to do that. And you can see some here in 3D. Tilt tip is just motion of the image of the PSF on the field. You have defocus, astigmatism, comma, astigmatism, comma, and spherical in 3D. Okay, so how do we do that with our system now? You can compute those wavefront and aberration using interferometry with a laser in the lab, on the lab. But if your scope is on the sky, it's not going to work. Or you could use a wavefront analyzer like they do in telescope for adaptive optic or active optic. like a Shack-Hartman wavefront sensor or pyramidal wavefront sensor, they all are designed a piece of hardware to retrieve the wavefront. But there is another way to do it, which is by looking at the image of a defocus star. And that's what we do here. See, this is an image of a defocus star of a refractor. There is no central obstruction. Defocus with no seeing. And what's technically known as irradiance, the intensity you see from your sensor, is used to compute the wavefront, which is the phase. So we try to find the phase, the wavefront, from the defocus image. And there are algorithms to do that. Phase diversity, GS algorithm, or the Rodier method. And you have that in Pixinsight, or you have that in WinRodier. They take two images, normally in the same time, which is hard to do, but unless you have an optical beam splitter, of the same star intra-extrafocal, and solve a differential equation to find the wavefront W here from the variation of intensity of the two images, the difference of the image. But all those techniques need to take images and do iterative numerical optimization at runtime. Those optimizations have local minima, doesn't mean they always converge. You need a good guess to begin with. It takes processing time, and this mathematical model is only valid under some conditions. So the way we approach the problem is to think basically the opposing way. We're going to use, because this equation, for instance, cannot be solved in a mathematical closed form. You need to use those numerical algorithms. So what we decided to do is to use AI to solve the problem for us once for all. So with AI and using a single defocus image of a star, we use a neural network to get the aberration. So we're going to feed a neural network with a defocus image of a PSF, a star, including seeing, and we expect at the output, the neural network is going to give us the aberration in terms of the Zernike coefficient of the polynomials describing the wavefront, or anything like that, and in that case, even the seeing, or any relevant data. So aberrations, wavefront error, and seeing are learned together. That's known as the inverse model. And what we do is we compute the wavefront from the defocus image. There is no iteration. It may take a week of computation to train the neural net, create the database and train. But when it's done, it takes less than 100 milliseconds on a laptop like mine, and you will see that, to actually do the calculation. So here you have an example of a defocus image of a reflector under seeing limited condition. The goal is we give this image to the neural network. The neural network was trained to output the Zernike coefficient, therefore we can compute the wavefront. How we train the neural network, then we compute many of those wavefronts with some error. We build the image with seeing, and we tell the system to learn the relationship between that and this. And the database is made, let's say, 1 million of examples. So that's a summary. How does it work? It was published on one of the two SPI conference proceeding of our technology. One was in 2019 in Europe, and the second one was in 2020 in San Jose. Was a joint paper with John Hayes. So here you see the way we do the system is we create random aberration in a given range for a given type of aberration. Typically for collimation, we are interested by low order aberration only, but there's not limitation. Those aberrations are taken at random, and they create some error, wavefront error, using the Zernike polynomials. We add the effect of the telescope, the aperture, the central obstruction, and of course, we add the defocus. For this technique to work, we need to defocus to be able to solve the problem. And the result is some kind of aberrated image, PSF, coming from a known aberration we took randomly here. So we know what the coefficient of the Zernike were to build this image. Now we give this image to the neural net, and we tell the neural net, look, this is this image with a given resolution. Give me back the coefficient I used to create the image, including eventually the seeing. And from there, I can rebuild the wavefront of my system after I remove the power, the defocus I use for the system. Because all these techniques, like Rodier techniques, need some level of defocus to work. And so we create millions of those examples, just pure synthetic simulated data, including seeing. We never use any image from any telescope. Yet, we can train the neural net and be able to use that on an actual scope under seeing limited condition and provide a wavefront. And that's an example you will see on the bench next to me. The bench is a portable bench I made for our AI wavefront sensing technology demonstration for the conference, SPI conference, or anything. It's made of a sample achromat in double pass like we saw for the previous bench. It's a 12.5 system at an inch diameter-ish. And we have source is made of 7 pinholes, 1.5 millimeter apart, you will see them, and a white LED. There is a beam splitter here. It's a pellicile beam splitter to avoid any aberration. And on the back here, we have a camera, again, the 1600, which is in fact defocus. So the light from any of the pinhole is reflected by the beam splitter, goes through the achromat, my telescope, my refractor, reflected by the flat mirror, which is a very good mirror. It needs to be good, with no aberration or way less than what we want to measure, and comes back through the beam splitter, through a color filter to limit the bandwidth a bit, and is imaged by the camera, which is typically out of focus. You can see the bench here. The achromat is here. Here inside the achromat lens, this is my refractor. The flat mirror in a mount, such I can adjust. Here we have a beam splitter. We have an XY table to align everything. We have the source with the pinholes. We have the filter and the camera. And with that, I have basically artificial stars, and I can do a wavefront analysis and show you. So this is what you're going to see when you turn the system on. You will see 7 pinholes, defocus image with diffraction rings. They have number. Pinhole 0 is on axis. Pinhole -3 is 4.5 millimeter off axis. -3 plus 3 is plus 4.5 millimeter off axis. And you will see live how does it work. So we can, with this technique, by the way, unlike with Shaq-Hartman sensor, all those wavefront sensors out there, we can retrieve aberration coming from different points in the field, like all those pinholes or actual star in actual telescope, at once with a single image. We can retrieve aberration, field-dependent aberration, which is a quite unique capability. So those are some results in the lab first, on the lab first, between our AI solution and the Shaq-Hartman wavefront sensor. So on that bench, we use the Shaq-Hartman, which is a wavefront, a piece of hardware. It costs $5K to give you an idea. And otherwise, we use our AI wavefront sensing, Skywave, basically, in the same condition. So 10 microns pinhole, a red filter, 640 nanometer. And here you can see the result. Those are the 2 wavefronts, color plot, heat plot, AI solution, Shaq-Hartman solution. Sorry. On the flat mirror, those are the different level of aberration. So the maximum aberration error we have between the Shaq-Hartman and the AI solution, which doesn't use any hardware beside the camera, is 3,000 of a wave. 1,000 of a wave at 600 nanometer is 0.6 nanometer. So we are very accurate. This is another example done by John Hayes. I'm sure some of you know him. He used to be the founder of 4D technology and also a professor at University of Arizona. Here you see his latest telescope is a CDK-20 on the lab. He actually measured this telescope on the lab. You can see the picture here with the flat mirror here, the telescope, and this is a phase cam. It's an interferometer for measuring the wavefront. It's a high resolution. It's a golden standard. It costs 50, 100K. And probably the flat mirror itself costs probably $1 million. So it's not an equipment you can afford easily, but you can see high resolution wavefront from the interferometer. Those are the fringes, but from that, you can compute that. And this is the wavefront. Look at those 3 peaks here. Those are the result of some level of trefoil coming from stress on the primary mirror. Although the telescope is diffraction limited. So there is always some level of stress. If you zoom in enough, you will see things. So that's what he found on the lab. And then he used his scope in Ben and compare with Skywave technology, using a star on the sky and a red filter. The thing was around 2 arcseconds, I think. So here you can see the images coming from the scope intra-extrafocal. The one with the green box was used for a Skywave calculation. The other one is just for the sake of completeness, so that you see both. So the results are over here. This is the result from the wavecam, 2D. We still see the three peak of the trefoil. The phase cam on the lab, average of 512 frames on the lab, give us an RMS wavefront error around 0.065, 0.07 waves. Strel ratio 85%. On the sky, a single frame we seeing give us with Skywave RMS wavefront error of 0.07. The difference is less than 50 milliwave. No, 5 milliwave, right? And the Strel is 82, very close. And you can actually spot the tiny trefoil coming from the stress on the primary mirror. And from this single image here, that one. And those are raw images here and there. On the right side, you see something looks the same, but those are images computed by Skywave using the wavefront information retrieved from this image and simulating the aberration, including the seeing estimation from the neural network, intra and extrafocal. And they are very similar to the actual raw image, a little bit sharper. They are sharper because they are monochromatic calculation, and those are polychromatic. There is a red filter. But they are very close, telling us then our wavefront sensor technology and Skywave, software only basically, actually did a pretty good job, as we saw with the phase cam, to retrieve the optical performance of the telescope. So in conclusion, the AI-based wavefront sensor can produce repeatable results very closely to wavefront sensor, such as interferometer or Shackert-Man. We have very good agreement in the sky. On the sky, we are at few hundred of a wave accurate, and in the lab, a few thousand of a wave accurate. It's a flexible approach. We don't use any data from the telescope to build the neural network, only synthetic data. You can do actually field-dependent aberration with a single image if you have more than one star in a field. It's an actual metrology tool. But it's a software-driven solution, so it's very flexible. So I think my next things will be to show you on the bench. But let me say 2 things first and answer the question we had before, I guess. Skywave exists in 2 versions, Skywave collimator for telescope collimation. And that one is free. The permanent license is free. And the Skywave Pro for collimation and full optical analysis like we saw with all the coefficient, aberration, and everything and the wavefront, but they use the same engine under the hood. And that's just an example coming from John Hayes. He gave me a bunch of short-term frames, a quarter of a second inch of a star. And I computed the wavefront live. So the variation of the wavefront you see here for the star, it's coming from the seeing. So the seeing changed the wavefront. Normally, the scope is diffraction limited, so that should be pretty flat. But you see bumps coming from the atmosphere. And I think that's a nice one because it shows you could use this for adaptive optic, in fact. It works like a Shack-Hartmann sensor. Okay, so my next step is a live demonstration of this. But before I go there, if you have any question.
Checking.
Go ahead.
Go right ahead, Dan.
Okay. Yeah, no, there's just a lot of people talking in the chat. A bunch of Derek Thomas seems to be the one, and Jeff seems to be the most experienced with this kind of stuff. They are definitely users of ONAG and of your software, so they're really excited about this. So.
And you don't need an ONAC to do that, right?
Nope.
Because the image we use come from the imaging camera. And you will see that on the demonstration. It has nothing to do with the on-axis guider. It's a different thing.
Okay. Yeah, and you said that in Sky Collimator and the SKW Collimator, that's free to download. You mentioned.
Yes. So the Collimator version is free. You just have to ask for a license, but the license is free. Mm-hmm. The Pro version is still in beta test. We expect to release the first version Pro for the incoming Advanced Imaging Conference in San Jose.
Nice.
In next month, something along those lines. And it's a metrology tool for people who have telescope and want to do full analysis. We have already customer in Chile interested by that for a farm of telescope. But both require a model of your telescope. You need a mathematical model of the telescope, and models, neural network, are for sale. You can request a trial model to test, but the model itself, eventually, it's a model you will buy, and we make the model for each telescope. As I said, to make a model, I mean, typically, it takes a week of calculation to compute the samples from simulation and train the neural net on the cloud.
Right.
And then we provide you the model. And you will see that soon.
Cool. And Jeff
and
Weiss
someone was asking, if you were going to be at the auto imaging conference there in San Jose yourself.
Astro.
Yes, we have a booth there. And by the way, John Hayes is going to do a nice presentation there as well, and he's going to show the results using SkyGuard and the Skywave collimation as well on his CDK20.
Nice.
So you will have an opportunity to see that. And we'll be there with a bench and live demonstration. So what you're going to see now, you're going to see there too.
Cool.
So if there is no more question, I think I go for the next demonstration, if you're okay.
Sure. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
That will be the wavefront sensing and skywave kind of things. So I need to now turn the light on the bench first. And I'm going to show you a first thing here, which is not skywave, but it's a software. We wrote a prototype software we wrote to test the waveform sensing technology. And I still use it to do some live tests, and I think it's a good demonstration tool. So what you see here live are the 7 pinholes. Try to adjust that here. And I have an XY table, so I'm going to try. Well, they are not too bad. They are center. The yellow cross is the optical center. So you see the frame number coming from the camera here. This is Python code, and that's just prototype code. I mean, we don't sell that. We just But I think it's nice to see that first before you see Skywave. So Skywave, the way I'm going to show you, doesn't have any way to take images. It takes feed files. Here you get live images of the 7 pinholes of my achromat refractor. And this is Python code, so it's not very fast. So it takes time to do download of the frame, process the frame, display the result, because it's not compiled code. We could actually go at the video rate, but that's not the point of that software. So now I can see the wavefront. So remember, the pinholes have numbers. This is -3, -2, -1, 0, +1, +2, +3. So, and all the wavefronts are computed at once. And now you can see the wavefront for pinhole 0. The pinhole 0 wavefront, live. You see few information, for instance, is defocus, as it should be at roughly 8 millimeter, which is 20 microns for the expected target. Diffraction limited, Strel ratio 99%. We have a red filter at 640 nanometer. You see the third order aberration for the people who are used to. You see the Zernike aberrations, astigmatism, coma, trefoil, spherical, third and fifth order. Here are the polynomial, Zernike polynomial with the different coefficients, and of course the wavefront. Now you can see it's diffraction limited. The RMS error is 14,000 of a wave. I told you the diffraction limit, 80% Strel ratio, will mean 75,000. So we are way below. But you can still see some level of aberration because everything is zoomed in automatically in a heat plot. And this is a sign of coma, astigmatism. And this astigmatism is likely coming from the mirror. The mirror is not perfect. Nothing is being perfect if you zoom in enough. But what's important is more to look at those numbers here. I need to move this stuff. Those numbers here. First, look at the defocus. We are 20 microns to the target. And look at the astigmatism. It's roughly 12,000 of a wave. Coma is very, very small, almost none, few thousand of a wave. Trefoil as well, and spherical, same thing, few thousand of a wave. Here we have roughly 100 of a wave of astigmatism coming from probably the mirror. Now, because it's an achromat, like any optical system, when you go off axis, you get more aberration. That's the nature of optics, right? And we have the model of this one, the Zmax model. So if I move off axis by 1.5 millimeter up, pinhole number 1, over here, come on, I say number 1. Okay. He doesn't want to do it. Just give me 1 second. I will restart the software because something happened, I think. Mr. Murphy is there? Okay.
Yep.
I need to close that and start again.
No problem.
He doesn't want to close. That's a problem with prototype software. Okay.
That's okay.
The hard way.
Force quit.
Yeah, should have actually Python, just kill Python, right? And that should solve my problem. Now, hopefully it will work this time. I'm sorry for that. I did the presentation many times over, dry, it never happened to me. I know Mr. Murphy is there. So, okay.
It happens.
We back.
Oh, good.
Yep, it does.
Okay. Pinhole W as number 1. Number 1, now it works. Number 1, you see we have a little bit more astigmatism. And by the way, we are a little bit further away from the target in defocus. We are 50 microns now. Because we have field curvature and also some tilt on the sensor. Astigmatism goes up, everything else stays the same. That's normal because spherical typically is not a field-dependent aberration. Astigmatism is. If I keep going up, 3 millimeters away from the optical center, I see even more astigmatism, 3 times more than before. And if I go 4.5 millimeters away, I have roughly 40, 45 hundredths of a wave, thousand of a wave, 4 hundredths of a wave of astigmatism. The diffraction limit is still diffraction limited. My Strel is 92, it's not too bad, but still. So you can see the techniques can detect very tiny variations because we are way above the diffraction limit. And we are defocused by 160 because we have field curvature and tilt. So we can use this tool when you compute field-dependent aberration to compute tilt on your optical system using the wavefront defocus information. And if I go from pinhole +3 down to pinhole -3, I should get the same amount of astigmatism because we are following a straight line across the optical center. So everything should be symmetrical, -1, -2, -3. And we see roughly the same thing, which is consistent with the Achromat model. So we have truly a wavefront sensor using only the image from the camera. You can see the PSF, which is pretty good. The square root, we see better the diffraction rings. And you can see what is fed in a neural network. This is the input for the neural network. And this is the reconstructed for the pinhole -1, right? The reconstructed output from the coefficient of Zernike. It's sharper because this is a monochromatic solution again. Okay, so go back to pinhole 0. Now I'm going to do something a little bit tough on the mirror. There is a small screw, a thumb screw on the side of the mirror at 45 degrees. I'm going to tie the screw and create some stress on the mirror and look at what's going to happen. You see, now we have elongated stars, right? Because the stress on the mirror is like collimation. But now it's because we distorted the mirror with the screw pushing against the mirror. We get elongated stars. And if I go back to, let's say, this pinhole and look at the wavefront, you see a lot of astigmatism. And this time is at 45 degrees because I push against the mirror at 45 degrees on the right top side. And you see astigmatism is across the roof. Now it's almost 10 times more than it was before. Spherical is very small, as it should be, but now we have some level of trefoil on top of astigmatism. We have a pinch optic, and Strel ratio drops at 70%. It's not too bad, but we are not diffraction limited anymore. If you look at the PSF, we see the sign of astigmatism from the stress on the mirror. Okay, so now you saw, if I remove the stress, we should get back to a normal situation. Now, let's see the same thing with Skywave. So I'm going to stop this one. Voilà. And Skywave I have here is integrated already in SkyGuard, but doesn't matter. It's the same thing. And this is the pro version of Skywave. The collimator version will be limited to the collimator information and a few things. You don't see the Zernike and the aberration or the wavefront for that matter. They are there under the hood, but you don't see them. But they are used to do the collimation for you. So the first things I need to do is to take an image because Skywave doesn't take any image. It's a standalone solution. So I'm going to use the ZO tool to acquire an image from the camera. So it's going to be a 16-bit image, and I think I bin it too. And what you see now are the 7 pinholes we saw before live coming from the camera.
Yep.
And I'll take a single exposure of 800 milliseconds, a little bit below 1 second. Here we are. And now I go here and load the image. So if everything is okay, the image should be here. We are should be here. 5:09, I don't think so. We are almost 10 p.m. Let me show I saved the image at the right place. No, I'm not. I'm not at the right place. That's why. Here we are. Okay, save the image. Now it should be there. So the way the software works, you load an image from any astro imaging software anyway. 10, okay now. And you load the fit and you wait. The system will process every okay, what's wrong?
Murphy's back.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, Murphy's back.
Oh, I know. I was not being. Okay, so this gives me an opportunity to show you. I have a bunch of models out there already of different type of instruments. And this one is my wavefront sensor optical bench, but it's not bin, so it's my fault. So I can connect to the model and I have to take a new image, unbin. So connect, 16-bit, unbin, fit, image. Need to change this again. Here we are. Okay, go back here, load the image. So it's going to look at every possible star in the field, so it takes some time, and extract all of them to compute the wavefronts. It will automatically show you the one which is the closest to the center of the chip. But you have a choice if you want to change this parameter. So let's look at the raw image here. You see, there are 7 pinholes. The software automatically selected the one in the center, but you have a list here of the star found. And here are the one which is actually in use for the calculation, the pinhole 0 on axis. You can see the wavefront here. You remember we had some level of astigmatism, Strel ratio 99%. On the wavefront, we see the same. Here are the aberrations, pretty much the same we saw before. A little bit some spherical. There are even higher order aberration in this system. And you can see the PSF, diffraction limited, nothing to see, right? Square root. And you can even see the 3D wavefront, which I think is nice to see.
Yep.
Right? You can see in 3D your wavefront. That's only available in a pro version. And the most useful tool for collimation is a collimator. So the collimator tools allows you to look at your collimation by type of aberration. If you use an SCT, a CDK, any telescope, Schmidt Cassegrain, Cassegrain telescope with at least a spherical mirror, the only things you need to know is to look at comma on axis. If comma on axis is 0 or minimized to below the diffraction level, you're good. You are also collimated off axis. You don't have to worry about off axis. If you have an RC, you may want to do that on axis and go off axis with astigmatism. And if you want to know how to do that, we have on our website a couple of presentations and explanation about how to use wavefront and collimation for different type of scope, like RCT. But for very simple scope like SC, CDK, and IDK, you select comma, and you see the system is very simple. All the information from the Zernike and everything is summarized in one sample interface, a target with a score. And the goal is to bring this rotating mark in a green zone in the middle, basically where the score is 8 or above. And here I'm in the middle because my scope is, is perfect. So even if I look at astigmatism and comma, it's pretty much 99, and spherical, I don't see anything. And this value here is almost the Strehl ratio because my seeing is very little. If I change my seeing, the score takes in account the seeing, which means the score is designed to give you the best collimation for your seeing. It doesn't make any sense to try to collimate better than the seeing you're going to have when you use the scope. You can do that, but you don't have to. So you tell the system your target in terms of seeing. Now, let's distort.
So let me ask this. Since for example, I have and several of us, we have Schmidt-Cassegrains. So if we decide, if we just download your software and when we use this for collimation, you're saying basically we just is there? I'm looking here, and I'm assuming is this using a Schmidt-Cassegrain as an example?
This one is the image I took from the bench we just used before. The achromat is a refractor.
Oh, okay.
But I can show you a Cassegrain after that.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
An example. But if you use whatever scope you use, you see there are here 3 numbers who are the collimation screw, and you can move them anywhere you want in the field here.
Mm-hmm.
And you have 2 sets of them, one for M1, the first mirror, and for the secondary mirror. So what you do by using the defocus image and let's say your hand or anything to create a shadow, you locate the position of the screws, right?
Yep.
And the collimator has the same reference system than the image. So now you can say, okay, my screw number 1 is here, my screw number 2 is here, my 3 is there, right? Based on the shadow.
Right.
And you can put a sticker on your collimation screw on your telescope to know which screw is which screw here versus the shadow you saw here and the screw on the telescope for each mirror. And then what's going to happen, and we'll see that when I create some aberration, if you have an aberration, this mark is going to move at some location in the target. Not only will be off the center, the score will be below 10, but it will be at some angular position. And by looking at where it is relative to the screw, you know which screw to turn in which direction to bring back the score at the center and collimate your scope. Basically, that's the way it works.
Okay.
It's very simple. In fact, if you have the rule, if you have a telescope like an SCT with a secondary mirror adjustment, or a CDK for that matter, if that central mark is moving along, let's say this screw number 2 direction is over here, for instance, you just have to tie that screw. If you move away over here, you have to untie that screw, and so on and so forth. That's it.
Right.
And you do it, you take a new image, and you should see you go closer and closer to the center. When you are in the center, then you are collimated. Now, you can look at other aberration if you want, but for those scopes, you don't need more than comma anyway. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to tie that thumb screw one more time to create ugly image on the bench. So here, and give me a break. Here we are. You see they are elongated now?
Yep.
By the way, the image is upside down in ZO software. We don't care. So I'm going to take an image and assume this will be my collimation problem or whatever, and see what the system reports. So load the image is over here, and wait for the results. Damn it. Why that?
It was too far out.
No, I shouldn't. I'm being 2x2. Oh, because I have two versions of the software running here. You know what? One bin 1x1 and one bin 2x2. And the software expect a bin 1.1 image. So it's why. It has nothing to do with the software. It has to do with me. Sorry for that. I used the wrong one. So take a new image and load that image one more time. I don't use the ZW software very often, so sorry for that. Okay, so that's going to be my image with a lot of some astigmatism. So he's looking at all the image in a frame. So that takes the most of the time. And the computation of the wavefront is 100 milliseconds, nothing. And you see, if I look at comma, I don't see much of anything. If you remember, comma was not a problem when you type, you stress the mirror. But if I look at astigmatism, now I'm gone, very far away.
Yep. And
you see that here, elongated, a sign of astigmatism. That's my PSF, right? If you compare this PSF with, let's say, the diffraction limit, you can compare with the diffraction limit. You are at the airy disk first 0, diffraction limit, my actual star. So my collimator tool tells me there is no comma problem in that example. I have a ton of astigmatism though. And I don't have much of any spherical. And you could use spherical to guess if the spacing between your mirror are correct. And all of that are independent from each other. That's the beauty of using wavefront and Zernike polynomials. You can look at one without having the effect of the other one. If you look at, for instance, the defocus here, it gives you the defocus value. For different stars across the field, you can find the tilt of your sensor or without having to be careful in terms of collimation. Or you can do the collimation and forget about the tilt of the camera. It doesn't matter because those are two different problems and they are split. If you look at the FWHM of a star across the field, you have everything mixed together. And so you cannot tell what is what. The tilt of the camera, the collimation, or everything. Here, you have a clear separation and data to back up that in terms of hard numbers. If you look at the wavefront just for fun, you see back to what we saw, Strel 43. I typed pretty hard the mirror and a strong sign of the sidal shape of the wavefront, which is typical of this problem. By stressing the mirror surface, in fact, what you see is the mirror surface here, which is a shape of sidal, kind of.
Right.
Okay, that's pretty much in terms of the demonstration. Can stop this one. And I'm sorry for my confusion with the ZO software.
That's okay.
That's okay.
I know more of my software and Nina or GSGP than this one. Oh, here is integrated in SkyGuard, but you can get Skywave as a standalone version, as I said before.
Nice. Awesome.
I think I'm ready for any question.
Yeah, a lot of people are going back and forth about the one question, and I think you touched on it already, that this collimation tool is free. Is that accurate?
Well, the collimation version where there is no wavefront, there is no aberration, there is only collimator, the PSF. The software is free, but you still have to buy the model for your telescope.
Got it.
That's for sale. And now you can get a trial model to test. And you can also, when you load the software and install it, you come with a basic 10-inch SCT model for you to play with some images already there with different type of aberrations, so that you can play with the interface and learn to use it.
Okay.
Okay, good.
This way you can get an idea how does it work. And you have even a simulator, which it doesn't appear here, but there is a simulator in a sample version where you can create aberration, random aberration, and look at how does it react in terms of collimation tool. All of that so that you can learn the tool. And when you're ready, you can use the model for your telescope. So you can buy a model. So the time it takes to get a model is about, well, I told you it may be a long time to make a model, but some models are already out there. Some takes longer, so it may take a week, it may take a day, depending on what you ask. And we have different type of model. The basic models for collimation are very simple. We have more advanced model for metrology kind of things. If somebody wants to check, for instance, the figure of his mirror when he's polishing the mirror, we can measure it at the central of curvature with a pinhole and use this technology to provide you the surface of the mirror. Because the wavefront and the surface are related to each other.
Got it.
Just an idea, right?
Yeah. All right. What else we got? Chat.
Yeah, I was checking here.
I think I have an example.
No, I don't know if I see any other. I see a lot of comments, but
yeah, it's a lot of talk back and forth regarding what you were doing.
but no, not really any specific. Excuse me. Questions.
While you do that, I think I have an example of it's not a Schmidt-Cassegrain, is a Cassegrain, but you know those Cassegrain with a catadioptric. What's the name of this? I forget the name. It's a very small telescope, but Apex made by Orion.
The Apex, that's the Maxitov.
Yeah, exactly. I have a small one in a bench here to test collimation, so I took some image from it. I can show you that.
Okay.
And I think oh yes, those are the two images I made by mistake just a few minutes ago. Okay, if I load this image, it should be an image taken in that telescope, and it should be off of collimation. On that scope, collimation is done by moving the primary mirror. And if you look at it, I think actually he's collimated here. You see the shape of the defocus star. There is a central obstruction. Some distortion probably coming from perhaps the beam splitter. I'm not sure. But its Strel is 84, so it's good. But those scopes are not very good off axis though. So you have to stay on axis because they are not very expensive, so you get what you get. So here the collimation tells me everything is fine, not much of anything. Now I can load the other frame, and the other frame I have is, I think, when the scope is off collimation. I can remove all of them. And for this one, you need only comma, in fact. Okay, so you see I have some level of comma. It doesn't look good, right?
Yep.
They are comma and astigmatism. The astigmatism is not coming from collimation. comma does, but not astigmatism. Astigmatism comes from the fact, because I'm not collimated, I'm not on axis when I'm at the center of the camera. Because I see an image at the center of the camera, but it's not on axis because the optical axis is tilted. And I'm off axis, and I see the off axis astigmatism of the telescope. So for the collimation, I will stick on comma. And what I see here is the example I wanted to show before. If you have an SCT, it would be the same thing. You see here, the position of the marker is along the screw number 1, which makes sense because this is the screw I use to create the miscollimation of the scope. And it tells me I need to push the mirror at that location because I am at the same direction side than the screw number 1.
Okay.
And so I have to pull the mirror, which means I have to tie the screw. And if I tie the screw, I will bring this one inside the green. But if he was over here, I will have to tie this screw a bit and probably to untie that one a bit. So you have to try until you come back. But with this tool, you have information about which screw you should screw or unscrew, tight or untight, and how far you are to the target. You have both information, the direction of the correction and the quality. And the Pro version will be able to do that with more than one star in a field and build a field-dependent aberration, not only for defocus and tilt of the camera, for instance, but also because we can solve, if you have more than one star, you can compute exactly the miscollimation and angle and offset of the mirror. And if you know how your screw works, you can, in one correction, center everything, even on a RC. And that's used in VLT, for instance, active optics to align telescope all the time. Use this technique. They use astigmatism across the field. And we're going to do that. Actually, we have a project in Turkey for a 4-meter telescope. They want to use our technology to do active optic for the telescope. Active optic meaning keeping the scope aligned, collimated. Adaptive optic takes care of the seeing. Active optic goes much more slower. We have minutes, but we monitor the wavefront of the scope across field to detect misalignment of the optic. And it's a 4-meter telescope with many actuators. So the project is, instead of using classical Shack-Hartmann sensor, you need many of them and you have to locate the star. We're going to use cameras scanning the sky off axis and computing all the wavefronts and controlling the actuator of the telescope with this technology.
One question I have when it comes to the collimation, the magnitude or brightness of the star that you're taking your image of, is that a major concern, or do you have to stay within a certain magnitude of brightness of the star that you're taking your image of?
That's a very good question. You remember the video you saw before where we see the waveform changing because the seeing? Obviously, you don't want to take too short exposure, right? Because otherwise you get wavefront error from the seeing. You want the wavefront error from the telescope. And like any other wavefront sensor, you have to wait long enough to average out the seeing. So you don't need to take short exposure, which means you have access to many stars. Now, in terms of amplitude of the signal, you just need to have a good enough SNR. And you see on the bottom here, you have a line with the ADU value. My advice is to say that's a 16-bit, so that's good enough. But don't go to the clipping. So you don't want to clip, and you don't want to go too low versus the noise. And actually here, when the system search a star, you can tell him the SNR you want to set for your star. You can go low, but lower you get, the more noise you get, and you may get more error on the wavefront calculation. Though for collimation, it doesn't impact much because this is low order aberration. So you use a star which bring your, let's say you expose your star for 30 seconds, 1 minute kind of things. and you shoot for somewhere between 1/4 to 2/3 of the scale of the ADU. ADC will be a good guess, which gives you plenty of stars for that. Just don't clip.
Okay.
All right.
Right. Just don't clip.
No, right, because the software will start to make crazy assumptions.
Right.
Looking at that, you can see if you clip from this, right? It will tell you how many pixels are clipped. He says 0 here. It will come red and tell you that. And by the way, also here there is another gauge who tells you your defocus versus the target. You're supposed to defocus that scope by in that one 17 millimeter because it's a very slow system, typically few millimeters. And it will tell you how close you are to the target. There is a tolerance. You don't need to be perfectly defocused. Here, the tolerance is almost a millimeter. So as long as this is green, you're good. It tells you also how far you are from an axis. And if you want to know more about your defocused star image and double check you don't have any kind of clipping, you can look at its 3D version, which is, you see the 3D version of your star, and obviously there is no clipping. But a strong gradient of light coming from the coma.
We had a question from Derek Thomas. Which filters should be used to acquire the collimation image?
Well, technically, you can use the luminance filter. It works with luminance.
Yep.
So for collimation is good enough. Now, to mitigate the effect of seeing and improve your quality, I usually recommend to use a red filter.
Okay.
You can use a narrow band, but you don't have to. Just a red filter will do. If you don't have a red filter, just go for the luminance. I mean, that's okay.
Okay.
If you do a more advanced optical analysis, as we saw before, to compute more accurate wavefront information, you may want to use a filter because you want to improve the quality of the image. Otherwise, it's pretty robust.
Yeah.
I think for the people who want to know more, there is a couple of Cloudinite threads talking about this technology and posted by a beta tester or customers showing the results on different scope. And I think all of them, as far as I know, were pretty happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been reading through Cloudy Nights, and I've also been thumbing through your website too. So there's a lot of information there as well.
Yeah, and I do understand it's a new technology. Those type of data-driven aberration and collimation were not available for most users unless you have a wavefront sensor like a Shackleman. Right. Or you use a WinRodier or a Pixinsight WinRodier, where you have to take 2 images and all of that. So it's a bit new. There is probably a learning curve. We try to make the interface for the collimation, like you saw here, as simple as possible. But it takes some time. And this concept of having to buy a model is also something new, because the system is based on AI. And we build a mathematical model for each scope. So when you buy the software, you buy the tool who can use the model to do the work. But the model itself is the heart of the engine.
Got it.
By the way, we have also the MTF, pretty ugly MTF, by the way.
All right.
So if you're going to be using this, if you have multiple telescopes, say multiple reflector type telescopes, you want to use the collimation tool, you'll have to purchase different a model for each of your telescopes. Is that correct?
That is correct. Though the models are function of the aperture and focal length, central obstruction. But you are free to select the wavelengths, the pixel size of the camera, and the seeing. In some, you should stay in some recommended values, not too big pixels, for instance. such there is enough pixel across the defocus image. That's an example. If you go with the things of 6 arcs-seconds, we may start to have some issues, those kind of things. But as long as you are saying in a normal kind of situation, you can change freely the wavelengths, the seeing, the pixel size of the camera for the given model, and you can even use a focal reducer as long as the reduction is not less than 0.6.
Okay.
So if you have a scope,
and the cost for something. So, for example, if I have an 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain, so for a 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain, is that a pretty that's a pretty standard size telescope? Is that one where what would something like that cost, or that type of a model?
If I can do that, I go to our website. It's probably easier for me to use it to answer the question. We sell the models here. And if you look here, there is a summary. The models come in 2 ways. In order to address the question of the price, you can buy permanent models. You can try with trial models, but after that, permanent models. You have permanent models for refractor, no central obstruction, and permanent model for reflector with central obstruction, either up to 13-inch or above, right? And after that, forget everything on the right here. Look at those 2 columns. Model come in 2 ways, 2 types. The pay-per-use model. The PPU models come with credits, 64 credits in a given model. And every time you take a new frame, unseen before, the system will take a credit away only if the collimation is good already, not too bad. I mean, if the score is above 6, it will use a credit. If your score is below 6, which is coarse collimation, your model will work with, without taking any credit. So the pay-per-use model is a model based on the concept of credits. And when you consume all the credits, you can buy a reload of credit for the model. I don't know if I'm clear there. So
yeah,
those pay-per-use models are cheaper, but they come with credit. Well, 64 credit, considering though we only use credit above 6 collimation score, lasts for a long time.
Gotcha.
Now, you can buy more credit eventually. Now, you can buy unlimited model. We don't have any credit. They can be used as many times as you want. In that case, they are a bit more expensive, but there is no limitation. Now, on a credit PPU model aside, if you load the same image again and again, you only use 1 credit. The system remembers your image. You use a way to remember blockchain technology to remember the image processed. So if you have more than 1 star on an image, it will cost you only 1 credit, even if you process several stars.
Got it.
Gotcha.
And you can bring the same image back later to check again. So to answer your question, you have an 8-inch, right?
Yes, correct.
So you have an SCT 8-inch, it will cost you 178 with 64 credits for your telescope, for your model. If you don't want any limitation, it's 456. But 64 credit on a SCT will last quite some time.
Right.
Because you will be, I mean, by the time you are in a fine collimation above 6, I think you will probably spend few images to collimate, and then you're done. You follow the rule I was talking about with the collimation screws on the collimator, and after some experience, you're going to be able to collimate your scope in a couple of maybe 2-3 images.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So by the way, if tomorrow you decide to go from PPU to unlimited, you can buy an upgrade, which provide you basically more or less the difference between them. You don't have to start to buy from scratch. If you already own a PPU model and you want to decide to go with an unlimited model now. The reason you may want to do that is And that's a feature we may add in some software like Nina. You could now monitor your telescope every time you like to see how it's behaving. It's just one of the ideas we have is at the end of the night, to pick an example in a sequence, the telescope will aim for a star, defocus, and do an analysis of the star and tell you the results. And you will know if you are still collimated, or you will see if there is any trend. You can even see how the collimation holds at different locations in the sky, which is interesting itself, because it doesn't hold all the time from experience.
All right. All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Gaston, for this presentation. It's been very, very enlightening on axis guiding and all the technology that you have going on from collimation and everything. So it's been really good.
Yeah, it really has been. It's been
Well,
really
thanks for your time, because it's already almost 11 p.m.
Yeah, you almost made it to the longest show.
There was a lot of things to talk about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, especially
sure.
I
when
hope I didn't lose too many people down the road.
yeah. And we do have to do the giveaway, since we have to do that. We do have a giveaway for Masters of Pixinsight Class. So we should really probably do that before everybody goes to bed. Jeff Weiss said, "See you at AIC."
Yep. So yeah, there's some people looking forward to seeing you there in San Jose.
Yeah, I'll be happy to be there.
Yeah, unfortunately, Pete will be there. I won't be there.
On top of that, it's a nice place.
Yeah, I know. I everyone's telling me you got to come down, and I just
yes,
can't this year.
You do.
Yeah, it's a 2-year. Every other year is when they have it, and usually it's in November. But this year, because of COVID, it's going to be in May.
Oh, it's every other year?
Yeah, it's every other year.
Oh, I thought it was every year.
Yeah, I thought it was every year too.
Oh wow! All right, so I got to wait 2. You tell me I got to wait 2 years now? I should have went this year.
That's right.
No, you have just come this year. You can still register.
Yeah, I'm never gonna make it in 5 days.
May 20th.
May 20th. Oh, May 20th. May 20th. I'm still not gonna make it. That's Memorial Week. Come on, man.
Oh,
I gotta get the barbecue fired up.
Of course. Duties, right?
All right, so let's see what we got here. Let's do this really quick. And here is we got a lot of more people in here for the IP for AP Masters of Pixinsight giveaway. We got 40 people now in here, so that's really cool. And thank you for everybody who has joined the giveaway and that has been hanging out with us and doing it. So this is for a free Masters of Pixinsight class. So here we go. No whammies, no whammies. Here we go. Andrew Westra. I believe that's our most recent sign up. So this is a new sign up. So congratulations, Andrew. We'll send an email out to you regarding the Pixinsight Masters of Pixinsight giveaway. And Scott's screen is still blank. And you be on the lookout for an email from myself and from Peter Proul over at Masters of Pixinsight. So congratulations to Andrew. Very nice. And Eric, I lost your audio. You're actually on mute. Nope, still on mute.
Yep, that happens.
There you go. It wasn't me.
Yeah, it wasn't you this time. And image of the week, was there? Are we still?
Yeah. So as far as image of the week is concerned, I'm going to keep the voting keeping on going for a little bit because we did have some flubs in the website. So I want to get in. We only had like 2 days of voting in there, and that's not enough. So we're gonna push it this last. What is it? April? Yeah. this last April picture of the week will be for next Friday,
Okay.
just so we get enough votes in there.
So we can see enough votes. All right.
Yeah. So right now we've had some flunkiness with the website, so hopefully that will all be cleared up by Sunday, and it'll be back up and running, and we'll just do the voting and let it roll.
All right.
All
Well,
right?
again, thank you, Dr. Gaston. Really appreciate you coming on and spending time with us and showing us this software. I'm really intrigued, especially on the ONAG, because I've never, myself, being new to astrophotography and imaging, this is the first time I've really heard of any of on-axis guiding. So it was very interesting to me. So I appreciate it.
You are most welcome.
All right. Let me just move this.
It was
over.
good. I have a tendency to speak a lot, so.
Nah.
Well,
No,
this
it was fine. It
really
was actually
informative.
very interesting, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about when it comes down to the mechanics of what you're doing. It's super
Exactly.
advanced, and it needs to be understood. So we appreciate the length that you took to kind of hang out with us, because it was needed.
Well, I think some of the technology, it looks complex, but the reality when you use it is very simple. But it's great probably for most users to understand what they are buying. And the wavefront stuff is very new for most of us. So I think it's useful to understand from where I come from. Professionals use that all the time, but it was not accessible for amateur until now.
Everyone said keep looking up info today. Yeah, I know a lot of people.
Yeah, somebody called me and said this. I said off-axis imaging. I meant on-axis guiding.
There you go.
So it happens.
There it is.
Good. Keep going.
That's awesome. All right. So any last questions in there? No, I don't see any questions. Just congratulations so. And people yelling at me that they can't vote. And did Image of the Week get announced? We answered that already.
Yeah.
And
that's
it. All right,
I think that's it. So it was a really good show. It was a really good show for this Friday.
Absolutely. So thank you again, Dr. Gaston. I appreciate you coming on. We'll definitely have to have you come back and maybe go into the collimation a little bit again. And you come back and show us how to collimate our Schmitz and RCs with it.
Yeah, I have it's difficult to do everything in presentation. So we
absolutely.
Have one. I have a SCT here of old Celestron orange tube 8-inch.
Nice.
Okay,
we use it in Madagascar to take picture of the Halley comet back then. So he's on the shop with an artificial star. So I can show you live, or you collimate that one.
So next time we should do that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I've got my little 8-inch orange right behind me.
and then I'll show you the picture of an 8-inch Byers that I had with the original Celestron Byers motor in it that came to the shop, and it came in really bad. Looked beautiful until you took the lens cap off.
Yeah.
Oops.
And the whole corrector was shattered. But
oops. That's bad, because you cannot replace that with a Home
Depot. It was completely useless.
Mine survived. I bought it in 1983, I think, or 84.
Yeah.
And then I went to Madagascar for a contest for the Halley comet, because you could see better the comet on the south hemisphere than on the north hemisphere. So it's a long way from Switzerland, but we made it for 3 weeks. And the time of the films, right? So I had the Earth axis guider back then to follow the comet, because the comet moves across the field when you image. And I was the guider. I was in charge. I still have my back. I still feel my back. and running the nuts, to keep the guide star center.
Yeah.
And then we take all those frames with different exposure time, but we couldn't see anything. we didn't know. So we sent everything by a mail, took some vacation, came back in Switzerland, and learned we won the first prize on the contest.
Nice.
But we didn't see the picture.
You didn't see the pictures until the end.
No, that's why I saw it on the I saw the picture on the magazine.
Nice.
Because what's happened is I was in vacation back then, and by the way, it was at the time of Chernobyl. I was there. I was lucky, I guess. And what's happened is I had a friend of me in Switzerland who took the films and sent to a lab to process for astrophotography, use special process, and made the decision to pick the image to send for the contest.
Wow.
And I saw nothing until I came back. It was
awesome.
quite an experience. But I still have that telescope here.
Oh, there you go. 40 years later.
Yeah, and still alive. So we can do a collimation. Yeah, just let's talk when you have time. It will be much shorter than what we did now. I will just go through
absolutely.
the collimation with Skywave.
Not a problem. We could definitely do that. We could set something up. Probably going to be after. Well, I don't know if Eric, are you going to Cherry Springs this year or no?
No, I'm actually going to be at that's at the end of when? July?
June 2nd to 5th, I think.
June 2nd to 5th, no.
Yeah. I think you had something going on. I'll be in Cherry Springs that week. So
I have something going on in mid-June, so I won't be able to take a trip. So we can't be. I can't go.
We gotta lock it in for the end of July. We gotta lock it in.
So we do have to lock it in, man. Definitely, we have to do that.
Oh, we have time. I'll be in Europe, in Switzerland in summertime.
Okay.
But we can do that in fall, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think we're ready to close shop. I think this is been a great show. Thank you again so much
for your time.
No, thank you for yours.
Really appreciate it, man.
Thank you. It was awesome. So everybody, have a good night. Thank you, Dr. Gaston. Remember on May 4th is our next guest, and that is Richard Wright from Starstone Software. So he's going to be hanging out with us as well, and we'll get that picture of the week thing sorted out. I apologize to all the subscribers and everything, so we'll get that all sorted out. And keep an eye out for your shirts; they're on their way. Thank you so much, everybody, for hanging out with us on another Friday night, and have a great weekend. And as always, everybody, keep imaging, keep educating, and clear skies. And we'll see you Wednesday night. Have a good night, everybody.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Have a nice one. Bye-bye.
Take care.